Time to hit the road. Turn right. Stay right,
Yeah,
and
so
then turn right.
each of the 7 characters in the modern day part of the novel are in different Indian diasporas around the world, and they can all be traced back to this couple who are their
Turn
common
right.
ancestors. And the novel sort of charts that couple's love story, and yeah, in a sense, well, we have the kind of story on one level which is going from upstream to downstream in terms of from the source to the sea of the actual river. We also travel against the current from the sea to the source, as it were, in terms of these characters finding out how they're related and going back to their ancestry.
Do you see these 7
straight.
separate stories working as sort of tributaries feeding your main story, or are they deltas that flow out from it, or both?
It's funny you mention that, because originally I included a kind of family tree at the start of the book, but instead of a tree it was a kind of sort of map of the rivers in Punjab, right? So Punjab translates to the land of 5 rivers, and then there was also the Indus, which was Pakistan, and the Saraswati, which I added in. But essentially I sort of turned the family tree on its head and had these sort of 7 streams all converging into one, which was with the common ancestors at the top, and then each of the descendants.
Throughout Saraswati, you also bring in many vignettes from the huge canvas of global current affairs. It touches on everything from water wars, border disputes, to bovine biohazards, invasive ant species, AI learning to speak to whales. I mean, when you're writing about London now, is it ever a struggle to keep up?
Get
with
ready
the
to
sort of
turn
stuff
left.
in the fast world?
Absolutely, yeah. It's if there are any some budding writers out there, my advice would be not to write a story
Turn left.
set in the present, because I did so many drafts for this book, like I was constantly revising it, and each time I sort of came up for air, I would look around and the world was immeasurably different, right? So I remember when I first did this, the sort of initial draft, the ending had this big like AI kind of ending where I was like imagining how AI might develop and all this kind of stuff. And I finished the draft, and then suddenly it had come into reality, and I was like, oh, now what I'd written is out of date. So at a certain point, I had to make peace with the fact that the world is going to change so quickly, and some of the stuff may instantly be out of date.
Good night, Johan, talking about his novel Saraswati. Our cultural critic on this edition of the Arts Hour is Vidisha. Saraswati in Hinduism, along with Lakshmi and Parvati, is part of
Stay
the
right,
Sri Devi,
and
or
then
the
turn right.
trio of goddesses. And I particularly like her because she represents knowledge, arts, music, language and culture. How does
Turn
a
right.
novel based around a river, Vidisha, moving from source to sea, appeal to you?
It's a really beautiful image, and it's exactly what you see when you open the page before the context page of a novel and you see the family tree of characters. That's what life is like storytelling, characterization, and nature are all like that river with the tributaries. If you think about the classic novels, they're often family novels, or they're clan novels. You start with a couple of characters and you follow them down through time. So it's a beautiful image, or you can think of it as a reversed tree. So one branch leads to lots and lots of different sub-branches. It's exactly how storytellers think about stories as well, because you keep carrying on the levels, you go down and down. And of course, when it comes to storytelling, everything is about action and consequence. And in fact, readers want
This is
that.
where it
They
ends.
want to see why this character is behaving like that. Well, it's usually because of their parents, or their history, or their heritage. You have to go back and back in time to understand human motivation. So it's a really lovely image, and I like too that the very river that he's talking about, the tributary, is now coming back to life, probably because of climate change.
Yes.
But it's an interesting artistic image. It's a really beautiful metaphor. So he's telling these stories and kind of bringing fertility and flow back into this image.
Are there any other books with a river at the centre which you rate?
There's a great Percival Everett novel called James. It's based on a sub-character from Huckleberry Finn, so it's a very clever, very beautiful work, and that takes the image of the Mississippi. And it also tells the story of slavery and liberation and escape, using the image
Let's
of
go.
the river as being a source of boundary crossing and travel and adventure and flight. So all of these different elements of the image are compacted into one, and it's also a lovely and frequently very funny novel. It's a beautiful novel.
As a writer yourself, and given the pace of technology and change, what are your feelings about writing about the present and future versus the past?
Any writer who is creating a 21st century set narrative must be so brave right now, because anything that you refer to that is very popular in 2025, by the time your book comes out in 2027, it will be out of date, embarrassingly out of date. It won't even have a kind of retro charm. It would be like me saying, oh,
Turn
kids
left.
got together with their mobile phones and they talk to each
Recomputing.
other on Snapchat and Vine, things which are not now human.
Stay right, then turn right.
We are in a total race against the pace of technology,
Turn
the
right.
pace of change, and the
You're listening to the Arts Hour from the BBC World Service. The iconic German performer Uta Lemper's career spans stage, film and music. Once described as the new Marlene Dietrich, Uta Lemper won the American Theatre World Award and an Olivier Award for her performance as Velma Kelly in the musical Chicago, both on Broadway and in London's West End. She won the Molière Award for her performance as Sally Bowles in Cabaret in Paris. Uta Lemper's new album, Pirate Jenny, revisits the music of legendary German-American composer Kurt Weill, who would have been 125 this year, and whose work she brought to a new generation, including me, in the 1980s.
Und der Haifisch, der hat Zähne und die trägt er im Gesicht.
Get ready
Just
to
a
turn
few
right.
months after the fall of the Berlin Wall, the world's
Turn right,
cameras
finding
were on
new route.
Uta Lemper when she performed at Potsdamer Platz in the German capital 35 years ago. She recalls that iconic performance when she spoke to the BBC's Anita Brown.
That was an incredible moment of time. It was the summer of 1990. So the wall is down just for half a year. And it was Roger Waters, not Pink Floyd, they were already split up. So Roger Waters was on this worldwide trip to promote his work, The Wall, his Brain Baby. And to choose at this moment the Potsdamer Platz in the middle of Berlin, at the epicenter of the Cold War, right there where the minefields had been, or the old bombs from World War II were still underneath, so they had to dig up the whole field and clear it, obviously. It was a brilliant idea, and he invited everyone, like Van Morrison, Joni Mitchell, Cyndi Lauper, the big top of the rock music to perform it. I had the privilege to meet. It was really super privilege. I was the only German, and I sang the Thin Ice with Henry Bond. Yes, but it was a time where everyone was so overwhelmed with this end of the Cold War. And remember, the people on the east side of Berlin were standing, didn't have money to buy tickets. There were 500,000 people at the Potsdamer Platz, most of them from West Germany, because East Germans, they were on top of the buildings, unsecured, watching the concert from the top of their buildings there, right next to the minefield. So that was brilliant.
I also want to hear about your conversations with Mummy and Deirdre. Can you tell us what happened there?
Well, this was also a long time ago. It was 1987. I was the Sally Bowles in the Paris production of Cabaret. In Paris. This role, and the newspapers were writing La Nouvelle Marlène, the new Marlene, and that was so overwhelming. This legend, how can they compare me? I wrote her a letter to apologize for the comparisons. And
that's sweet.
Yeah, and she got me on the telephone, long before internet, 87, and she found me in the hotel, and we had a 3-hour conversation. And 30 years later, about this very overwhelming conversation where she was very wicked, uncensored, provocative, wild, this older woman who lived as a recluse in her apartment. She hadn't left the apartment for more than a decade. She didn't want to show her aged face. And the big wave of melancholy that hit me over the telephone line was the fact that she couldn't go back to Germany because she had fought in World War II as an American soldier. She had, given up the German nationality. She didn't want to be seen the Nazis. She said, now I'm going to be American and I'm going to go to war for them. And the Germans treated her as a traitor. 40 years after the war, until her death, 1992. So that is a very big and tragic story.
Uta Lemper. Our cultural critic on this edition of the Arts Hour is Vidisha. Uta Lemper returned to the music of Kurt Weill, whose work with playwright Bertolt Brecht has famously been interpreted by Nina Simone, Lotte Lenya, Louis Armstrong, or Louis, depending on how you believe it should be said. How important was Kurt Weill's work and why? I'm thinking from the Lobber's Mac the Knife especially.
Kurt Weill is so important, and in fact I remember being a teenager and listening to
Stay left,
his interpretations.
then turn left.
Her voice is so exquisite, and Weill's music really puts me into
Turn left.
a strange twilight cabaret scene where there's an element of adventure and temptation and seduction and sinister threat, which I think is very Middle European. I think it's very Germanic. I think it ties in with a very deep non-British European tradition of storytelling through song. So there's a sense of warning, there's a sense of political awareness, and there's a sense of transgressive, internalized, dangerous, seductive characters. Weil is so clever because, like a true artist, he creates an entire world that you then get lost in, and no one else can replicate that.
Thank you, Vidisha. That's it for part 1 of the show, but don't go away, still to come. Nigerian superstar Burna Boy, Fargo showrunner Noah Hawley, and I'll be talking to Hong Kong film director Elizabeth Lowe. The Arts Hour's back after this.
This is the BBC World Service, and Salma El Wardani is looking into whether redesigning parts of the Egyptian capital means women are safer on its streets.
I'm in Cairo, city of my work. The streets here are busy, they're chaotic, and sexual harassment has historically been a huge problem. We have to constantly do a mental arithmetic of where we're going to go, and if we can even take public transport without the fear of being catcalled or abused by men. Over the last 15 years, however, the tide has begun to turn. One project, the UN Women Safe Cities Scheme, has created safe spaces for girls. I chat to women behind these spaces.
A long time ago, women empowerment was just a talk. Now it has become a reality on the ground.
Safer Streets. To listen, search People Facing the World online or wherever you get your BBC podcasts.
Still to come on the Arts Hour with Nina Kibodi, Emmy-winning US showrunner and author Noah Hawley discusses taking big screen hits Fargo and Alien to the small screen. I'll be talking to Hong Kong film director Elizabeth Lowe, whose latest work is Mistress Dispella, and Nigerian superstar Burna Boy. All that and more still to come on the Arts Hour.
States has offered a $5 million reward for information linked to the arrest in Haiti of the gang leader Jimmy Cherizier, also known as Barbecue. Federal prosecutors announced criminal charges against him. Cherizier has created an alliance of gangs that now controls most of Haiti's capital. Mexico has transferred 26 detained high-ranking cartel figures to the United States in the wake of pressure from President Trump to crack down on fentanyl smuggling. The Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has pledged to collaborate with Washington on tackling drug trafficking. President Zelensky says Ukraine will not abandon the Donbass, the eastern region that Russia and its proxies now largely control. It's believed annexing the Donbass will be a key demand of the Russian leader when he meets Mr. Trump on Friday in Alaska. The Trump administration significantly changed key US government reports on human rights, softening criticism of countries that have been strong partners with the president. The report said El Salvador had no credible reports of significant human rights abuses, and the section on Israel was trimmed down. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Palestinians will be allowed to leave Gaza before the army expands its operations. Speaking to Israeli media, he denied they were being pushed out. South Korea's former First Lady Kim Gun-hee has been arrested after a court issued a warrant to detain her on charges of stock manipulation, election meddling and bribery, which she denies. The court in Guatemala has handed prison sentences to 6 people over the death of 41 youths in a fire at a shelter in 2017. They were accused of having padlocked the children inside a classroom for alleged bad behaviour when the fire took hold. National Guard troops have begun arriving in Washington, D.C., a day after President Trump said he'd deploy them and take control of the U.S. Capitol's police force. Mr. Trump says he wants to tackle out-of-control violent crime. 800 National Guard are expected to be sent in. BBC News.
Welcome back to the Arts Hour on the BBC World Service with me, Nikki Beatty, and if you've only just joined us, here's a rapid recap of what you missed in the first half of the show. So far on this edition of the Arts Hour, US superstar Barbra Streisand on duetting with Bob Dylan after over half a century of friendship, British author Goodnight Joelma on how an ancient Indian river inspired his new novel, and we heard from German singer and actor Uta Lemper. If you missed any of that, you can catch up via the BBC Arts Hour webpage. Coming up in this part of the show, showrunner and author Noah Hawley discusses taking big screen hits like Fargo and now Alien to the small screen. I'll be talking to Hong Kong film director Elizabeth Lowe, whose latest work is Mistress Despair, a documentary. First though, Nigerian superstar singer-songwriter Burna Boy has been growing his career for over a decade. He's a trailblazer who's helped to bring the Afrobeat genre to a global audience, and he now fills stadia around the world. The BBC's Eddie Caddy first met him when he was an up-and-coming talent in the early 2010s. When they reunited recently for an interview, Eddie asked, given Burna Boy's meteoric rise to fame, what else does he want to achieve? Live from
It no longer compatible with a modern, heavily used public space. The nonprofit is now backing Writer's Law, a city council bill named after a horse that was euthanized after it collapsed. If signed into law, it would end horse carriage licenses in 2026 and help drivers transition to other jobs. The push comes a week after a horse named Lady collapsed and died in Hell's Kitchen.
Governor Kathy Hochul says more than 1,600 New Yorkers have applied for the state's new free community college program for adults in high-demand fields. The CUNY and SUNY Reconnect program starts this fall. It covers school tuition for residents ages 25 to 55 who want to train for careers like nursing, advanced manufacturing, and green energy. The governor says it's aimed at solving worker shortages while giving adults a pathway to good-paying jobs. The program covers full tuition, so applicants still need to meet standard admission and residency requirements. Right now, again, it's 81 degrees in Lower Manhattan. We're going to see temperatures this evening fall into the mid-70s. It's going to be pretty humid, though, out tonight. For tomorrow, partly sunny, a chance of showers and thunderstorms in the afternoon, a better chance of showers and thunderstorms in the evening tomorrow. Highs reaching the upper 80s with the humidity. It's going to feel like it's in the mid-90s tomorrow. More showers likely for tomorrow night. Temperatures again in the mid-70s. By Thursday, mostly cloudy. More rain is possible on Thursday. Thunderstorms as well. We'll see temperatures in the upper 80s that day. Again, humidity is going to feel hotter than that, with temperatures in the low 70s on Thursday night. Stay with us. You're listening to All Things Considered here on WNYC. It's Tuesday at 7.
Support for NPR comes from member stations and from Indeed, committed to giving job listings increased visibility with relevant candidates through its sponsored jobs feature. Learn more at Indeed.com/NPR. And Odoo, maker of all-in-one management software with the goal of being simple to use for all employees. Learn more about Odoo at odoo.com.
It's All Things Considered on WNYC. I'm Sean Carlson. According to health experts, there is a disproportionately high rate of undiagnosed and life-threatening heart conditions among black men in New York City. Mount Sinai Hospital, along with a nonprofit group called Real Dads Network, are hosting free heart screenings specifically for black men to detect serious heart conditions. Joining us now are Mount Sinai doctor Isilma Fergus and Kenyatta Rouse, who's part of the Real Dads Network and a former NYPD detective. Both helped initiate free heart screenings for black men here in the city. So, doctor, why are black men more likely than other groups to have undiagnosed heart conditions? Is it an issue of access to care or problems overlooked?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to be here to answer such an important question. So it's multifactorial. It's not a simple answer, but part of it would be what you call the social determinants of health, social and or structural determinants of health, such as what you mentioned, access, etc. But I think that a large portion also has to do with understanding the culture of black men. Sometimes there's pride involved, or just feeling that they may not be manly enough going into the doctor all the time. So the type of thing that we're doing, going out into the community and reaching out to people where they can talk and they can feel that they can trust the individuals, is really helpful, and we hope will help to eliminate some of these disparities.
Kenyatta, can you briefly tell us about how changes in your own health led to increased awareness about the need for regular screening?
Absolutely. Here today. Actually, we always say, and I'm going to take a quote from my brother Puma from the Real Dads Network, I will die for my kids, and I will die for my family. I'll do anything for my family. So what we're trying to do at the Real Dads Network is change that narrative and say, let's live for your kids and let's live for your family, because we want to be around and we want to be healthy to see our family nourish and grow and for ourselves.
Now, doctor, you mentioned social determinants, right? Lifestyle factors,
Yes.
Things like housing, neighborhood safety, food deserts. How do those things affect cardiovascular risk?
Absolutely. So food deserts, for one, and in Harlem, there are many great places, but in the surrounding boroughs, for instance, where many of the black men live, there may not be healthy, accessible, fresh foods. And so just to eat, people may be eating more processed foods. Processed foods may be higher in sodium, which of course will make the blood pressure higher in sugar, which of course can give someone diabetes.
Caution.
De faire des suivis au niveau parce qu'ils ne sont pas enregistrés ou sur une feuille de match, par exemple, comme un entraîneur ou un joueur, où est-ce qu'on peut suivre.
Mais est-ce que la culture est en train de changer? Est-ce qu'on s'améliore ou non?
Je dirais que non. Je pense pas qu'on s'améliore. Toutefois, est-ce qu'il y a plus de couches? Je pense que la problématique aujourd'hui, c'est que ça fait le tour beaucoup plus rapidement en raison des réseaux sociaux. Puis là, à ce moment-là, c'est de ça qu'on parle. On parle de cette situation négative-là, au lieu de parler des officiels qui ont atteint un certain niveau, qui ont fait une finale de tournoi ou qui ont été dans un certain championnat, qui sont des choses très positives qui arrivent plus souvent dans l'arbitrage que le côté négatif. Règle générale, au total, sur 100 quelques mille matchs de hockey, on a beaucoup plus d'histoires positives que négatives.
Il faut dénoncer, il faut le dire haut et fort lorsqu'il y a des situations d'abus. Des situations qui n'ont pas leur place dans le sport. Souvent, ce sont des jeunes. Moi, mon garçon, qui a 16 ans, vu arbitrer, va commencer à arbitrer cette année. Et honnêtement, j'espère avoir la chance de pouvoir faire un match père-fils avec lui, peut-être même plusieurs matchs. Alors, merci beaucoup d'être venu aujourd'hui, de nous parler un peu de ce qui se passe actuellement pour l'arbitrage au Québec. Et puis, dans quelques instants, quelqu'un probablement que tu connais assez bien, Éric Furlan, qui a eu une très, très belle carrière, qui se poursuit dans la Ligue nationale, va venir boucler la boucle de notre 60 minutes sur l'arbitrage. Marc Maisonneuve, directeur des officiels de la sécurité des joueurs chez Hockey Québec. Encore une fois, merci de t'être déplacé en studio.
Merci beaucoup.
On s'arrête quelques instants.
Hein? Il n'y a personne sur le chantier. Je suis pas obligé de suivre la limite, non?
En fait, oui. Respecter la limite de vitesse sur les chantiers, ce n'est pas juste pour la sécurité des travailleurs, mais celle de tous, la tienne aussi.
Ah ouais?
Même s'il n'y a pas de travailleurs, la configuration de la route reste modifiée, les voies sont rétrécies, parfois déviées, et il peut y avoir des obstacles.
Ah, c'est vrai, t'as raison. Je vais ralentir.
En zone de travaux, peu importe l'heure ou la présence de travailleurs, la vitesse affichée est celle à respecter. Un message du gouvernement du Québec.
Chez Hydro-Solutions, on n'installe pas juste des chauffe-eau, on installe aussi des thermopompes. Avec ça, été comme hiver, votre maison reste toujours à la température parfaite de 20 degrés Celsius.
21.
20.
21.
20.
21.
21. Hydro-Solutions, on loue, on vend, on installe, on fait tout le travail.
Quand vient-on de choisir une Volkswagen, ne faites aucun compromis sur la qualité. Louez ou achetez votre Volkswagen chez Spinelli Volkswagen, la Chine.
C'est l'événement l'été.
Last couple of games, it looks like teams have been focusing a little more of their attention on Kenny and double teaming him, which means Bo's had to move the ball around. Has there been a target? Has there been somebody else that has sort of stepped into that role and become
deliver that front? But
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
oh no, I was just going to say, I think when you are coming into a franchise that you did not create, the best thing that you can do is transpose your own interests onto it and find something within the larger mythology that's underexplored and worth drilling down on. I would say, to your earlier example, Andor certainly did that with the idea of Star Wars. You know, you ignore the Jedi stuff and you just focus on the idea of political rebellion and fascism and authoritarian control. And I would say this is very similar in that maybe it's not quite up to Andor in quality, although who knows where future seasons could go. But it is saying, like, oh, you know, there's always been these synthetic characters, but it's always been like one person who's a member of a crew. What if we just really made that the center and the aliens are present, but it's not entirely just trying to extrapolate the classic xenomorph hunting everyone down narrative into 8 hours instead of 2. And I thought that was a smart take.
Okay, I've got 2 minutes left. I want to split the time between two of you. Broad question, but hopefully I can ask for a concise answer. We're watching this franchise. You know, last year it was revived with Romulus. That was a big hit. Now we've got this TV series. How are you feeling about the direction of this new Alien franchise and where it's heading?
Well, I mean, I think I'll just incorporate one thing. What I loved about this series is that it deepened a lot of the stuff that was already there in the original movies, and that's specifically what you mentioned earlier, labor and exploitation, right? And I think kind of getting to really dive deep into that was one of the more interesting things that this franchise did, specifically where there's a cyborg character who has to go off into missions, and his missions means he goes into cryo sleep for 75 years, and that means he outlives his loved ones, and that means, like, by outliving your loved ones, you lose your humanity in a sense, because now all you're committed to, the only constant in your life is your job. So I think, like, that really emotionally, like, drew out the labor and exploitation.
Ready to roll. Stay right, then exit right. Exit right. Stay left, and then turn left. Turn left.
Merci d'analyser la pratique d'inclusion des clauses sur le genre par le président qui
Stay left, and then turn left. Turn left. It was a nice ride.